All right, how about if we get started? Keep joining everybody, but in the meantime, good afternoon to everyone joining us today. And thank you for the privilege of allowing IIDA into your family room, into your living room, into your home office, into your office if you're back at work, wherever work is happening for you right now. And wherever you are, I hope that you are safe and that you're well, that you are rested, and that you're staying strong and optimistic. I'm Cheryl Durst, the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, the International Interior Design Association, and this is episode 11 in our ongoing collective design webinar series. The series is very generously sponsored by Interface. And today we're spending a bit of time talking about design leadership and how women lead design. You know, the profession of interior design is about 85% female, and those numbers reflect our membership at IIDA as well. And so today's very extraordinary panel will be in a dialogue about leadership, equity, challenging the status quo, mentorship, inspiration, and the importance of the work done by designers every day and always. And so a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Today's program is CEU accredited by IDCEC for one CEU. To receive the credit, you must attend the entire webinar. We'll know if you sneak out. Your credit will be reported within 7 business days if you registered with an IIDA member number. If you didn't register, please email our education department at contactceu@iida.org with either your IIDA or IDCEC number. And we'll pop this slide back up again at the end of the program in case you're trying to grab a screenshot of it right now. Now, for our panel, I am so incredibly humbled and honored to have joining us today 4 women that I so respect and so admire, and I'm so proud to call them friends. Please join me in welcoming Klehr, Avia, the Regional Managing Principal of Gensler, Gabrielle Bullock, Principal and Director of Global Diversity for Perkins Will, Sarah Kuchar, the owner and Creative Director of Kuchar Studio, and Angie Lee, Partner and Design Director of Interiors for FXCollaborative. I'm incredibly proud that all of you are IIDA members and such strong supporters of professionalism in interior design. Robin is a fellow in our organization. Gabrielle is a past president. Angie just became, within the last 10 days, the president-elect of IIDA. And Sarah is one of the most extraordinary volunteers here in our headquarters city of Chicago that I've known. All right, my friends, shall we get started? Are we ready? How's everybody doing?
Great.
Well, awesome. Well, we've got, yep, we're ready. We already did our pre-show about Zoom fatigue and everything else. I would like to just jump right in, and I'm so glad that you're here, and we don't want to have our heads in the sand about anything that's in front of us or anything that we're dealing with as an industry. And so I want to start with, we're having this conversation at such an incredibly volatile time. We're not just facing a global pandemic, we're facing societal unrest, almost this other pandemic of injustice. We clearly have been known to have challenges in our design community, but we support the client community, we support humanity, and so these times are so significant. How can we be a force of change right now? What can design do right now? And I would love your insight on how we can support moving forward and how design can truly make a difference. And Gabrielle, I'd love to start with you.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. Well, first, it's more than a moment in time. And if this is a movement, I'm talking about the racial situation in this country, it's a movement, and that implies move. right? And so while this may be new and urgent for some, this has been a reality for many of us. And so I believe that there was some divine intervention that caused this to happen at this time, right after the COVID pandemic. And then I think it's an opportunity for us to dismantle the systematic racism that exists, address and reset our profession to truly, with eyes wide open, embrace, celebrate, and apply the unique perspectives through an inclusive and just lens. And I don't think anybody is in a supporting role here. I think everybody has the responsibility within our design profession to be active, sustained, and deliberate in our actions to truly impact the environment through design. And it's clear that the world needs us to do that. So that's it.
It's beautifully said, and it's all of us, not some of us. It's all of us. Angie, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I absolutely agree with Gabrielle. This is not necessarily the first moment. It's definitely not the first moment. But, you know, we can make a difference by paying attention to the stories that we've conveniently not shown a light on in the past. Or, you know, we've actually dismissed or revised them to fit a system that just is not serving us. To be a force for change, I think it's time to be more specific. There's plenty of change that is not working for the greater good. There's too much design that's literally insidious and simply awful, from fast fashion to fast furniture to redlining, and the list goes on. So I like this as a call to action for everybody, literally everybody. So, you know, get ready to feel sad and angry and shocked. Those are the emotions that we tend to not give a lot of airtime to, but it's important to learn how to manage the whole ball of wax. You're on mute.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I've got children were playing in my front yard, and I didn't want 900 people. It's recess time, and I didn't want 900 people to hear that. Thank you for that, Angie. Life in Zoom. Anyone, Sarah or Robin? What about leading through a time like this?
Well, I think we've all recognized that we can't be silent or complicit. I think that I agree with Gabrielle and Angie. It's at this moment that we have to be active, and we have to have actionable items. You know, we've all of us in all of our firms have had dozens of conversations, right, in the last 2 weeks. And we all know that we have existing programs, we have ongoing actions, we've had different kinds of things in our firms for years on diversity. We all have, but I guess we have to recognize that these efforts haven't been enough. They just haven't been enough in the architecture interior design industry because there are significant structural barriers. And so I think that, yesterday we had a broadcast where, our CEOs announced very specific strategies. And I think that if we want to, all of us want to engage across our firms, across all our offices, across our platforms, we have to engage all of our organizations. We really need to bring lasting changes. I think it's going to take really serious work from multitudes of individuals, communities, institutions, organizations. And I think the recognition is, we all know that companies have a major role too. It isn't just the institutions. Right. And that one single action isn't going to solve the problem. That we have to strive for major impact. And we know that, as my fellow colleagues said here, we know that actions are really what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. We've had the time for words, And now it is time for actions. As Gabrielle said, it requires a movement. We need the verbs. Sarah, I want to make sure you get a chance to say something.
Sure. Yeah, we, we actually just had a conversation about this yesterday evening as a team. We're a small team, we're 7 people, we have diverse backgrounds, and, just having honest conversations with each other and asking questions and, what can we do as individuals and as a team. I think that's actually the best part about being a business owner, is saying, like, how can we use this business to make change? So, and I think it can feel overwhelming. How do we make change in our industry? How do we make change in our city? So we just started talking about what are things we can actually do that we think we are going to do, that seem like little steps, but will make some change. So we're gonna, I'm kind of adamant about it now. Like, we've talked about a lot of things over the last year and a half, but like, we have to put time into this. We have to make it a priority. And little things can make some change in someone's life. So, that's how we're approaching it.
Hey, Sarah, while I've got you here and while you're putting a period at the end of that sentence, let me ask you, you've worked for a large firm, you now run your own small firm. What are some of the differences that you see? What are some positives and negatives and some opportunities and challenges that first of all, that you faced as a woman? And then also in that transition to leading your own firm now?
I think it's actually interesting. I think being a woman business owner has, it's a really good time to be a female business owner. There's also the strong movement of supporting women-owned business, and there's a lot of programs out there which we're getting involved in. I've also connected with several female entrepreneurs in the city in creative fields. We meet quarterly. We help each other. We're currently helping each other, and I've honestly seen nothing but help. And there's never been a time where it's competition. We've competed against each other. We've told each other that it's happening. It's like this, I think, just the female approach. And I guess my circle tends to be a little more female, so it's a little easier for me. But we get so much respect, I think, from our clients, from the contractors. So I just really haven't seen personally any hardships in starting the business as a female owner.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
I will say it's very refreshing to have your small business and be able to make the decision. You don't have to go through several steps. We can convene as 7 people, decide what we want to do, and we just get to go do it. And I think that the lack of process really makes things move a lot faster.
Angie, challenges, opportunities you've experienced in your career?
Sorry, there's a drill above me. So
yes, we all have kind of the noise thing going. And who's helped you? Who's supported you along the way also?
Yeah, so that's a really important question. I think the challenges that I've had are similar to many other women. Of course, they're similar and also very different. But the main challenge that I can think of really is playing by the rules. Not because I don't like rules or I'm not good at following rules, but it's because the rules aren't the same for everyone. And, being brought up in a male-dominated profession, culture and society, the advice that I was given and I applied to myself would not work out most of the time. From just flat out, just dismal results to like buzzsaws. And so I had to try everything until I found out what worked for me. And it was a little challenging because it took a little longer to find my voice, find my footing. But along the way, I did have people who saw that, I had a lot of grit and believed in me. They were sadly all male. There were not a lot of women in front of me that I could look to for guidance. But, they sort of helped me come out of my shell. I just remember one story where this one boss asked me to read aloud a newspaper in the backseat of his car to the design team on the way to a meeting because I was so shy. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is so embarrassing. But I did it, and then I got into the practice of presenting more and more to larger audiences, and I'll never forget that. But at the same time, it was always a model of leadership that just never fit me like a bad suit. So, you know, I think going forward, it's really exciting to see people like Sarah, you know, doing it differently. So I'm truly inspired by you know, Sarah and that crew.
I mean, I'll say that that's why I did it. It's like, if I can't find your way, just start it yourself, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Robin, what about in your career? What opportunities or challenges have you faced, and what could you share with our audience?
Well, I think I'm the senior member of this panel, so you know, early in my career, I think it was more my own insecurity that really kind of turned me into like a planner. Like, I never walked into a meeting or a presentation without having every T crossed and dotting every single I. And I'm sure there's people out in the audience and they're thinking, she's still doing that right now. Although I would watch many of my successful, you know, male counterparts, and they winged it. You know what? They were really good at it. I wasn't like that. I knew my material cold. I called it my Girl Scout mentality. And I think in the long run, it made me a much more effective professional. You know, early in my career, Walter Hunt, that many of you know, told me that one of the things he appreciated about me was that I didn't act as if I knew it all, that I asked questions and I sought out those who had the answers. And I think that also taught me a lot about teamwork and how to put teams together, and that it wasn't always about me. And I think that the individuals, knowing what I know about the individuals on this panel, that's very true about these individuals too. And I think that is what makes us successful. I think that, you know, that's obvious to a lot of people, but it was very new to me because as a child, I would watch my brothers play basketball in Little League, but there weren't girls' athletic teams when I was a kid. And I think that's, you know, playing in the 60s. And I think that's something which maybe women today have the advantage of because they are part of teams.
Yeah, team sports taught so many people about negotiation and collaboration and the power of multiple voices over one voice. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Robin. What about mentors for you, Robin? You mentioned Walter Hunt. What about mentors in your life?
Well, Cheryl, you know how I'm going to answer this one, right? Because Cheryl knows my mentor. But you know, while I've been home, you know, while we've all been staying home, I don't know about all of you, but I've been watching different TV reruns, and I never watched Mad Men. So I started watching watching Mad Men, and I said to my daughter, you know, this is what it was really like. I mean, this is the 60s. But it was like it when I entered the workforce in the 70s. It's hard to believe, but this is the way people were treated professionally. And I remember when I decided as an interior designer, I wanted to work for an architectural firm. And I interviewed at 3 in New York. And Gensler was the only firm I interviewed with that there was a woman sitting across the table, and that was Margot Graham. And Margot sort of affirmed for me that it was possible for a woman to be recognized and rewarded. You know, there was somebody in my image across, you know, that was in charge. And you know what? She was the boss. And that had an incredible effect on me. I think in hindsight, I have to say, I was very lucky to be working with Margot, although I didn't necessarily feel so at the time. I mean, I was working 12 to 15 hours a day, and although she wasn't Miranda Priestley, you know, she wasn't an easy person, and she challenged me. She was a perfectionist. She just about killed me, but she taught me the design business. But I've said this many times, and I'm a real proponent of this. Margot wasn't a mentor. She was a sponsor. And I think that's what we all need to be as women.
Yeah,
you know,
that's great.
It's about us sponsoring, and it's about a sponsor opening doors for us. It's about someone putting us in a place where we can succeed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that is really, I mean, you're all shaking your heads, so we all know that is really what we all need to be for other women. We need
Yeah.
to be their sponsors.
I love that. I love that. Angie?
Yeah, no, I think that's incredible. I think that there's a great learning and unlearning for me that's happening in terms of being a mentor myself and realizing what I've done successfully and what I've not done successfully, what is actually mentorship and what is sponsorship, and putting people in positions where they are literally, you know, gonna sort of fail sometimes too, because you need that. And I was put in, given many opportunities to fail. And I think there's a different level of going forward in terms of expecting what you need to then put in front of people to grow differently. So I think, you know, I mean, it's a little hard to talk about, but I think looking back at how I got here makes me pause, because I would not wish that really on anybody. And I know a lot of you can say the same. And I like this idea of sponsorship, because that's what happened to me. All these men who I thought were mentors were actually sponsors.
Yes.
And I didn't really meet my mentors until I joined organizations like IIDA.
Mhm.
And this is like this sort of magical network where I get to now talk to people who know exactly what I'm talking about how we came up through the ranks, what we want to change going forward, and how to help us dream big enough again. Because I feel like that's what I kind of lost along the way.
Yeah.
You know, sort of trying on these models of leadership that just never really jived well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think the fact that mentorship can cross gender and demographics and age, but the point, Robin, that you made about Margot, seeing her as a leader, we can't deny the power of representation.
Absolutely.
It's just so critical. And, you know, while I can be very universal about membership, seeing someone who looks like you, who shares much in common with you, seeing them in a critical position of leadership is so, so important. And Gabrielle, representation is such a critical part of equity and diversity. Have you mentored other women? And I want to keep in mind, there are women that I know that look up to you. You're an unintentional mentor. Like, mentorship isn't always this formal thing. There are people who follow you, lurk, stalk, whatever we want to call it. But you can be an unintentional mentor as well, that people are watching how you are advancing through your career. But I'd love for you to touch a bit on some folks that you've mentored and how representation plays such a critical role.
Yeah. So I see, you know, I'm maybe a role model to some, and an example of what you could be, how far you could go. And the women that I've mentored many of them are not at Perkins and Will. So women that I've met through IIDA and other memberships, right? People, women, men reach out to me, and I always respond. So hence the, you know, Zoom tiredness. But I think it's important that we be able to be available for anybody, particularly as a Black woman in this profession. There aren't that many. So I see it as a responsibility and honor to be able to mentor, sponsor, share, you know, to anybody who needs it and wants it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for being both a role model and a mentor and a sponsor. Sarah, have you mentored?
You know, I have actually. This has, I think, been one of the nice blessings that's come along with this business venture is the people who I get put in touch with, people who are looking to start their own business in any field, or just looking for more senior roles in design. I think just because it's, you know, it's kind of rare to leave a big firm here in Chicago and start your own business, even rare to be a female. So I automatically get, you know, my name is sent to people, and I get coffee, I get drinks or whatever, you know, before when we could. I often get to hear people's plans it, which is the real exciting part, to have the scoop.
Mhm.
But, you know, we just have real conversations and on, you know, the scary parts about starting a business, the things you should think about that you might not be thinking about that I didn't. And then it's just ongoing conversations, and I'm usually checking in, or we become friends. But I love helping people through it because I've really enjoyed the help that I've gotten. And I think that's honestly been one of the best parts of doing this.
Yeah, perfect. Let me get really, really specific for a minute and ask, if you don't mind, Angie, if I can ask you, this conversation is about women in design, but at this particular moment in time, as we are trying to navigate through, right, our dual pandemic, what do you see as the role of women in design at kind of this point in time and culture?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important that we continue to make new models of leadership and creativity available to everybody, not just other women, but to other men. I think that there has been some incredible case studies. You know, Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, the Prime Minister there, has led without sacrificing her femininity and without adopting these hyper-masculine models for leadership. And she has been incredible and sort of an inspiration to me. There are other women who are incredible also outside of this field that I look to as like kind of amazingly sort of successful, and it's weird to say, but it almost seems obvious. Like, why wouldn't we have tried this before? But I think as women right now, we have to really try to speak to our allies, speak to our advocates, and help them unlearn the way that they've gotten to their pinnacles of success. And especially in our field, it is so heavily male-dominated and Eurocentric. It's our responsibility to create the space to have the kinds of stories that have not bubbled up to the surface to affect and influence and direct the attention that we're spending on the kinds of projects that need the most help. You know, as a designer, I do feel like there is so much power that we wield, and it is untapped for the most part. We do have this incredible privilege of designing for a very rarefied tier of wonderful clients, but you know, we reside in the top 1%, or, you know, sometimes charitably we'll design for the bottom 1%, and everybody in the middle is a little bit left out. So I think, you know, as women, I do believe we are really good at empathy. We almost are it's like our superpower. And we tend to not let that run freely, because we have to mold ourselves to various outlets in the ways that society wants us to behave. And if we let that go, like the Prime Minister of New Zealand, I'll bring her up again, you know, we can start becoming a lot more innovative and, you know, get to the finish line much faster. And we really need to do all of this together much faster.
A common thread that I've heard from all of you all is around confidence and finding your voice. And it's such a subtle thing, but I don't think any of us and any of the 900 folks listening should ignore the fact that you do need to find your voice. And once you find your voice, you need to use your voice. And it's so important for us to advocate for ourselves as women and for other women, but also for our profession. Advocating for the profession is critical, and advocacy and activism couldn't be more important now. Robin, can I ask you, who or what inspires you?
Well, I think that I would have answered this very differently 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago.
Okay.
I would have answered this very differently. I would have given you today. I think, you know, we're all on video. We're all virtual all day long, and it's really interesting. There's this unique and intimate, just even now, you know, we're all looking into each other's homes, right? There's this unique and very intimate perspective, this 360 degree of all of our lives. And, you know, you sort of think, but being apart, it's difficult to get a good sense of people and their leadership. But I have to say that in reality, I find that I've become more of an observer of people's courage and their determination and their grit. So the people that I admire, it's not these lofty, you know, I would have said I admire this designer or I admire this, you know, creator. Our design synergy group puts out this thing called Homework. And it's a collection of all in progress, creative, innovative work from our whole entire global platform across like Europe and Asia and the Americas. And the last one that came out, which was a week and a half ago, had 367 pages.
Wow.
It was so incredible to see what people, how prolific, you know, we are as designers. You know, this isn't, I mean, it's sort of, you know, all of us. And I was so inspired. I sat late into the night, just going through these 300 and, you know, some odd pages over and over again. And I was so inspired by just all the, and I don't believe that I would have had that experience if it wasn't for, you know, or I wouldn't have experienced that. And I'm sure you all have had those kinds of experiences where you're, you know, you're in a client meeting virtually and you see one of your young people sort of take on a certain kind of leadership and you're an observer of it, where you might not have had that observation in a regular day-to-day situation. It's really an incredible feeling.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Angie, who or what inspires you?
I think anybody who is able to turn fear into action. You know, there is, I don't know, and I've been learning about a lot of new heroes also that I'm a little embarrassed I didn't know about before. Like Grace Boggs, who is a Chinese activist who really helped sort of galvanize a lot of these movements and protests. And I'm just learning about her, but you know, like Theaster Gates, who is an activist and an urban planner and an artist.
And here in Chicago.
And they're in Chicago, and his way of resisting is staying in place, and you know, it makes you want to just cry with joy and also with sorrow. And it's, you know, and it's like people like Toni Morrison and the writers who are like really coming up and teaching me so much about grace and resilience. And this one woman, Amanda Wing, she's a Vietnamese activist who's changing the laws state by state to around sexual assault. These are incredible people who are not listening to the, you know, the folks who are saying, oh, it's impossible to do any of the stuff that you're actually doing. So that's where I am.
I love that. I love that. And I love that, you know, galvanizing fear into action. We often internalize our fear, causes us to not use our voices, but turning that fear into action, that's perfection. Sarah, who or what's inspiring you these days?
Well, you know, I live really close to the Loop in Chicago. I'm just a couple blocks from it. And I have been going through walks through the Loop during quarantine. And it's almost bizarre to walk through Chicago's busiest, you know, city center with just 0 people in the streets. And it's like falling in love with the city again. Just walking around, I'm seeing all these details and I'm like, why didn't I ever notice that? But I think it's because you're just dodging people and you're like trying not to get hit by a car, that you're not really looking up and around. But when you have the time to really kind of stop and take in the details, you just see so much more. And it's made me kind of do that more often on my walks and really appreciate so much more about the city and kind of old architecture. And yeah, it's just been inspiring me lately.
Of the few things that COVID has given us, kind of playing on what Robin was saying when she may not have had time to, you know, peruse that publication she was looking at, it's like you rediscovering a city that you live in because you've had that moment to do that. Gabrielle, kind of going to combine a couple things for you. I want to ask you a little bit about what inspires you as well, but let's have this conversation around balancing or integrating life and work. You've worked for forever. You've raised a daughter. Let's talk a little bit about that.
You said worked as in past tense.
No.
I'm still working.
Totally present tense. It's completely present tense.
Okay, so
Deep breath.
work-life integration, not balance, right?
Whatever you want to call it.
So, if you had asked me this 4 months ago, I would have said, I got this. That I've planned and I've scheduled as much as I can to make everything, my work, my career, and my family. Nothing was going to take over the other. But I got to say, working from home now with a 19-year-old daughter has been eye-opening and has really changed the way I work and live. But I think it's a blessing in disguise because I see things that I may not have seen before if she were still at school. So then, I got to pay attention to that. I got to work on that. And then I realized that I can't work 24/7. I'm not as productive in the same way as I was when we were not working from home. And so I appreciate firms like Perkins Will who understand that life happens.
Yeah.
And life must be part of how we lead, how we work. And so it's been surprisingly not easy at all, but we've had support to get through it, as I'm sure all of you have. So yeah, but it's, and I think we're now looking at it in a humane and realistic way, that these two pandemics throws all of the pretty picture organizational charts and, work-life balance stuff right out the window.
You're right.
And so we have to reinvent those two.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, there are some things we're going to reinvent, and I think there are some things we're going to relearn. These 16 weeks, these 4 months have been eye-opening to so many things. And what do we keep and what do we jettison? And I think we're realizing that almost every single day. Angie, any thoughts on, whenever I get asked that work-life balance question, or when I ask that, I always, and you've heard me say this before, nobody has ever asked my husband about work-life balance.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. I know, and I love Troy to death, and he's probably got it all figured out. That is a thing that I'm still looking for. It's when I hear people say that they've achieved balance, I'm in awe, or I'm a little bit skeptical. Gabrielle, I guess she confirmed it. So I don't know if it's integration or if it's just a myth. I mean, all I'm looking for is equilibrium and just being able to do what I can do without being overwhelmed and without getting burnt out. And to be fully transparent, that has happened a couple of times. I have a son and a daughter. And I'm trying my hardest to teach my son the same things that I teach my daughter. I mean, it's ingrained in me. I'm still learning how to do this right. And when we talk about work-life balance, and it's only addressed to the women, this is my whole thing. I think Gloria Steinem said this, I'm going to screw this up. I'm not even going to try to attempt it, but to paraphrase, instead of raising our daughters to be like our sons, raise our sons to be like our daughters, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that extends to education at the earliest, grade school levels. It certainly applies to the architectural curriculum. I think we have to teach our men, our allies, our partners, our sons, our husbands to do more. And this is not a super fun conversation to have. But it's important. It's just as important as, having all this anti-racism education and how all of this is connected. I'm sort of going beyond the boundaries of the question, but it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
whether it's pandemic with the COVID, with the protests and civil rights and racial equity, and then the environment, there's environmental racism, there's gender and environment. The whole thing is completely entangled. So
Yeah.
the men have to step up. We have to there's a lot of work to do.
There is a lot of work to do. And that, you know, I know that at a certain point, all of us either had a parent or our mom say to us, whether as women or as Black women or as Asian women or as women growing up in New Jersey, Robin, you have to give 110%. The expectation has always been that we had to give more and do more, and everybody should be giving 110%, and probably now 125%. Robin, work-life balance. You've raised a daughter.
Yeah. I don't know. In our business, you know, the business of design, we're all creatives. Whether you're on the creative side or you're on the management side or you're on the leadership side, we're creative and we're creatives. And I think that balance is healthy, but it's really hard to separate life in distinct categories in what we do. I think it's because we're motivated by our love of the craft and by the way the love of the craft can change people's lives. And I think that in our business, we get into this thing where it doesn't feel like work because we do it because we love what we do. And I really believe that it's a decision you kind of make based on your individual circumstances. But I think it's much easier to do that if you understand the close interrelationship between your work and the rest of your life. And I think that you also, and you know, Angie mentioned this, and Gabrielle, it's this treating work and life means you need a network of people who also share and embrace your life together and are supportive of your work and what it is that you do as a creative. And if you don't love your work and the people who are in your life at home and at work, success is going to be really harder to achieve in both cases. And the rewards are kind of empty. So it's interesting, this thing about, being so exacting. And I think that there's no other profession that's as hard as, we observe life through the lens of designers. And I think that is, so we're, what does that mean when we're looking at everything? Are we working all the time? I don't, yeah.
I think so, Robin. I think it's in the DNA of designers, that in some way, shape, or form, intellectually or emotionally, you're always working. I think it's just, it's who you are. It's who the profession might be. Let me ask, and this is a question that's popping up from a number of women in the audience. How did you learn to be a leader? Did you feel it within you? Did you, obviously, probably some of it came from mentorship and sponsorship, but what is your approach to leadership? And Gabrielle, you are so not looking at the camera right now, and but I'm going to start with you on this one. What is leadership for you? Uh-oh. She has a panicked look on her face, and she's looking for her mute button. I'm going to let you find your mute button. There, you found it. Yes.
So I lost the whole screen for a minute.
Oh, wow. That was a real life moment.
Yeah. So you asked, I think, two questions. I'm going to tell you how I became a leader.
Perfect.
And it wasn't me who decided that I was a leader.
Perfect.
Somebody else saw it in me. And I will say that I've not struggled, but my career path I didn't see it as leadership. And I actually came from a more management approach. And so I've discovered that there's a difference between management and leadership. And so navigating that line and figuring out when to be one or the other has been very interesting. So yeah, hopefully, I don't know. I don't know if there's any part of that question that I did not ask or answer, but yeah,
Fair enough. Fair
yeah.
enough. Sarah, can I turn that question to you about leadership?
Yeah, I kind of interestingly learned about this at a young age. I was voted the captain of my soccer team in my varsity year of senior year of high school. And I came from a very small town, so there was no tryout situation. You were just on the team. But I was by far not the best player. I mean, like, not even close. You know, like, I can run a lot, but like, I don't know, I'm not good. And, you know, I'm not scoring goals. I can just run a lot. So I was just always encouraging everybody, like, keep going. Like, we were practicing, just keep going. Like, do it, you know, do 2 more drills. Like, we got this. Like, you know, I was getting people to go get ice cream after practice or something. I was just always kind of cheering everybody on and trying to keep spirits up. And I remember when they had the voting for captains, and the women who were on varsity since freshman year, who were great, very skilled players, did not get votes. You know, it was I got votes, and, you know, there's another female who was also a strong advocate for everybody. And I thought, my coach said, like, I'm going to have four captains, because there's no way these other girls can't be captains. They've been on it for 4 years, you know. And I just remember thinking, like, how interesting that people didn't vote for the most skilled person. And it's, you know, I think that people think that just because you're good at what you do, that you're then a leader. And I just remember thinking that moment, like, it's really weird that I got this because I'm not good at this. And so I just really realized young that it's all about your you know, organizing people and getting people in a big group and getting them, you know, to feel purpose. It's not exactly that you're the best at what you do. And I think that's something that most people don't think about.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic life lesson, and that skill around articulating purpose, because as human beings, we gravitate toward purpose. We gravitate toward all kinds of things like charisma and humor, but purpose is really what human beings need to feel that connection. So there are a lot of future leaders in the audience, and a question that keeps popping up, what advice would you give if you all were giving a commencement speech right now? What advice would you give to a recent graduate in interior design? I'm going to let you contemplate for 2 seconds more, and then I am going to ask Robin. What advice would you give to a recent graduate?
Well, it's very different than it would have been last year, I can tell you that. Because last year I would have said, send me your resume right away.
Yeah.
And I think so would everybody else sitting on this panel. I think it's going to be really, really challenging because of, you know, obviously what's happening in the world right now. And all of us don't know what's going to be happening in the next couple of months. But I think that what it's about right now is, I would be working on that resume. I'd be preparing that portfolio. I would be utilizing all of the contacts and the connections. You know, I actually, in a very different time, and this does not compare. Okay, this is I think a lot more difficult. But I actually joined the workforce during a recession. And I think that it was, and I also think it's about not making an assumption. You know, you're coming into the workforce, you're coming into, not making an assumption of the specifics of what you want, but look more at what the opportunities are that are presented to you. So that, you know, it might not be exactly initially what you had planned for, but it might be something that is going to lead to something else, that's going to lead to something else, that's going to lead to something else. I remember I came out during a recession and I went to work as a secretary for a developer because there were no jobs in architecture. And after 8 months, I met the architect for the developer, and I started doing tenant fit plans. So there's many different ways in which one can connect into getting into the profession. I think you have to leave yourself open.
Yep, absolutely. Angie, 5-second commencement speech? 10 seconds, I'll give you 10 seconds.
Yeah, take what's offered. You know, there's a lot of, no, seriously, there's a lot of opportunity right now to do something meaningful that's outside of this industry entirely. And I'm looking at things that I would love to apply for as an intern, like the Center for Policing Equity. I introduced you to Phil Goff, and he's got open in the sustainability field, or things that I have put off for too long. And I always find that the most interesting and valuable designers are the ones who had the weird ass histories. You know, they came from, you know, I don't know, they were a contractor, a psychologist, you know, a veterinarian assistant. I remember all these crazy resumes that were like so intriguing and made people stand out, and just spoke to the aspect of being curious and really just searching and not being satisfied with, you know, sort of doing nothing. And even if it's like, I don't know, I don't want to tell anybody to do unpaid internships ever, but volunteer work and other things that are available now, you know, just go get it and see what you can do. I mean, even if it's small, there's stuff to do right now.
And being a volunteer in any organization, but organizations like IIDA don't ever negate your volunteer experience. It is as valid as paid employment. Just because you're not getting money for being a volunteer doesn't negate or diminish that experience. And it should go on every resume, regardless of whether you're just out of college or whether you've been practicing for 30 years. I have a question from the audience that I would love to ask, and I want to thank Mike, whoever Mike is, but Mike asked, what specific actions can men take to support women in general or women in leadership? So Mike wants to know what he can do right now for women in leadership. And there are lots of, in the chat right now, there are lots of bravo Mikes. Sarah,
Mike.
Yeah. Sarah, what can Mike do to support women and women in leadership right now?
I mean, I think it's all about giving opportunity, you know, give opportunity young, you know, I think that there's, you know, I always sometimes feel like I'm looked at as like a, you know, just a young female. And I think give someone a chance and do it more often. You might think that you're doing it because it's a woman more often than you should, but I guarantee you, you're probably just not doing it enough. So be conscious of giving the opportunity.
Perfect. Perfect. Gabrielle, what can Mike do?
Oh, Mike. Proactively support the women in your sphere of influence. Be, you know, vocal to other men who may not be so enlightened, but need to get enlightened, and to be able to be that voice. And I will say, you know, this is not just a women's issue. If there's an issue with women, there's an issue with everybody. If there's is there an issue with diversity, it's everybody's issue.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you, Mike.
And one more side question. Mike also wants to recruit more African Americans into his firm. And Gabrielle, I'm not just asking you this question because you're African American, but I am. And so for all the folks out there who say that they can't find Black professionals, what do we say?
So you have to be deliberate, you have to be active, and you know, there's the recruitment from HBCUs, historically Black universities. There's also recruitment at other universities specifically toward people of color and Black people. So there are you know, while the pool is not as large as the white pool, it is out there, but you have to look and you have to find, and, you know, NOMA is a great resource for recruitment and for building the pipeline. You know, there's one thing to be able to recruit, but we have to build the pipeline for the future. So, and that's where K-12, K through 6 exposure and awareness of our profession to the Black and Brown youth is where everybody can have an opportunity to influence that pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And scholarships help too, by the way.
Yeah. Hashtag truth. In our last 4 minutes, my friends, I want to ask each of you, what are you optimistic about? What are some things that you're looking forward to next year, next week, tomorrow? Let's end on some optimism. Robin, what are you optimistic about?
Oh boy. So let me just.
You were optimistic that I was not going to ask you this question.
Yes. Okay. So you know what? I've been at this for 44 years. So I'm rounding third base in the game. And I think the best part is that I can look back and see the structure that others are building upon, the foundation. I can see women that I've sponsored making the world a better place. I talk to a lot of young people. I work with about placing value on significance over success. I think that's really important. And significance isn't like a one-off. It's not about what you did last week or last month, but it's really about what you do over the course of many years. It's your life's work and it's your reputation. So I'm hoping I'm going to make it to home plate. And I hope when I make it to home plate, I want to be there when I see some of those changes in all of these things that we talked about today. You know, actual changes, significant changes, all the kinds of things that we are all so hopeful for. I want to see that, not, you know, I want to experience some of it in our profession. I want it, you know, I after 44 years, I want it, you know, it didn't happen in some cases in the last 44. Maybe before I get there, it will, because of this new focus.
Perfect. Angie, what are you optimistic about or for?
Well, I'm optimistic about how much education is being shared with so many people now. And I think when people are passionate about something and when they're inside of a story, when it's like a first person kind of thing, where it's not performative, it's something that they are doing with intention and expectation that there is a better outcome, great things happen. And I think there's so many devastating events that are occurring now that are making people realize that they have a purpose. There are some very clear goals to go towards, and I'm very excited to see what happens. I do think that the atmosphere feels very different right now, and I think that it's going to mean something.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie. Sarah, what's keeping you optimistic?
I think that I'm optimistic that people kind of need us more than ever to really help them with space. You know, space is dangerous right now, right? Interiors, unless it's your home, people are scared to be in it with other people. And we can really help make people safe. And I think that seeing that we can have this research-based design and really make an impact, and people value that more than maybe they did in the past and really see our value. You know, clients are reaching out and asking them what to do, and maybe it's just spacing out desks and adding some hand sanitizer, but the fact that they're coming to us, what do we do? You know, like they're coming to us. And I think that to me is nice to see that we are needed in this, and that, you know, hopefully that carries on past this.
Yep, that expanded value, coming to talk to you about thinking before even talking to you about space, and talking to you about people before talking to you about space. That's excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Gabrielle, what are you optimistic about?
So it's optimism and skepticism all balled up into one.
I
So
love that.
I'm optimistic that the way our design industry jumped on the response to COVID and how we can improve our workplace or respond to our workplace, our healthcare, everybody jumped online, no questions asked. I'm hopeful that we can do the exact same thing with the second pandemic that we're facing right now, and that this goes beyond hashtag Black Lives Matters.
Yeah.
It cannot remain a hashtag. So
Right.
I know we can do this,
Yeah.
but that's where my little bit of skepticism that we
That's
can
all right.
we can do the hard work. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Hopeful for the hard work. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for your wisdom and your optimism and for your leadership, for being such incredible sponsors and mentors to all of us and to all of you at home. Thank you for the honor of allowing us to join you and share this conversation. Thank you, Interface, for sponsoring this program. Everybody stay safe, stay well, stay optimistic, and stay powerful. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye, Cheryl. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.